Hello, friends. Welcome to the Note Coach podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Kohlberg, joined today by Mary Rothwell, and we're going to talk about sociopaths. And the reason I'm particularly interested to talk about this with Mary is a licensed therapist. And I was just saying before we hit record, I try and stay away from that sentence because it always irritates me as a listener. But anyway, I'm already in there now. How personally I find today's societal couch diagnosticians most frustrating. Like it's like this person's a narcissist and this person's got borderline personality disorder and this person is this. So when Mary pitched me for the podcast and the title was Sociopath at Work, What Would Nature Do? And I read through it and Mary's like, I am a licensed therapist. This is my backstory. I was like, I have so much more credence and so much more interest from someone who's in the field. But also, as I said, we were discussing, sometimes, the diagnosis, like we can have experiences with people, and in that moment, they might be displaying a trait, and we all do it. We have times where different parts of us take the lead, but that doesn't mean us as a whole. And the actual diagnosis of someone can take, months or years, depending what it is. I had my son diagnosed on the spectrum, and that took nearly 2 years. And I can't remember how many different professionals we saw over the time of it. And what was interesting is the person who first flagged it and suggested that I go down the path, the diagnosis they were throwing around wasn't actually what he ended up having 2 years later. So, and I think, anyway, all that to say, Mary, welcome. And would you like to start with the story about what happened to you? That sounds bad.
Yeah.
Give us some context for where we're going with this.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here. And okay, so I will tell you this story, and it's really interesting because I have a podcast. I do many episodes. I recently talked about sociopaths, and it was a little bit about this experience. And I had two people reach out to me, and basically the sort of the context was sociopaths are people too. So, what that made me do was step back and read some of the things that they suggested. And so, let me put a little asterisk here very quickly. Sociopaths don't often go to therapy because people that go to therapy are there because they want to change their lives. And if we look at, and I'm going to say, quote, stereotypical sociopathy, they don't have that kind of skin in the game. They tend to go through the world, and here's where I was called out by saying they, because that separates them from us. And they are people. Yes, they are people. Um, but people that function under this diagnosis, they don't have empathy in the same way that we do. Now, again, I want to make sure that people understand there can be other neurodiverse diagnoses that affect empathy or affect understanding emotion. But this is more of just an absence of sort of feeling anything other than maybe anger or simple sadness. There's no complexity. So, really, if you're diagnosing someone, it's antisocial personality disorder. It's not sociopath. And you can look at many different things and actually find people referring to sociopaths as psychopaths. It's all very muddy.
Hmm.
But anyone under 18 cannot be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. They would have conduct disorder and they would have different qualifications to get that. And there, I would say in that space is when you have a lot of room to be able to mold that. And with the help of parents, therapists, to sort of help somebody learn some of that, because you really are learning to apply empathy. You're not really feeling it in the same way. So when we talk about the word sociopath, we tend to think of the worst case scenario, crime, things that are perpetrated upon people. And so sociopaths, when you even say that word, there's a certain connotation typically.
Mm.
So I wanted to kind of say that first part because as a therapist, I am not saying they're not treatable. I'm not saying they're not people. I'm saying that their behavior typically impacts the people around them quite intensely. And those are typically the people that end up in therapy. So let me tell you a little bit about my up close and personal experience with what I term a sociopath. Now, I'm going to put that in quotes because I didn't apply the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which is the DSM, which is what we use to diagnose. I didn't apply it. I'm telling you what it felt like. And Martha Stout wrote The Sociopath Next Door. She wrote it was not Surviving the Sociopath Next Door, but she wrote a next book that was sort of like how to handle these people. And if I had had that one when I was still in this situation, I think I would have come out of it a lot different. But I was in a job that I loved, in a career that I loved. And the place where I was working, I was there for 8 years. Very, I would say, respected, had done a lot of work, loved my team. And when you work with a team of therapists, you're pretty close typically. It was a pretty healthy environment. And I had a supervisor that I just really admired. He was a wonderful mentor and always very supportive. So he retired, and then we had a process of hiring someone into that job. And it was really interesting when it started because there was sort of a sense of Mary, help me out with this position, like help me learn the ropes. And over time, things kind of, they sort of went in this different direction. And if you've ever had, it's a gut feeling, if you've ever had a gut feeling of like, something's not right. And I think the interesting thing when you run up against someone who displays a lot of the behaviors of someone with antisocial personality disorder, the trap we fall into is we look at the world through our lens, meaning I would never intentionally say, do, or treat someone this way, so it must be me, you know? And the longer it goes on, the more it sort of undermines your sense of who you are because we try to put this, I'm going to say a typical frame on it. Like, we're not going to intentionally set out in our day to knock somebody off balance and continually try to undermine their self-confidence. But
I'm
it
just going to
became,
interrupt you there. Like,
yes,
remember the part of the story, like put a pin in it because I want to come back.
yes,
But
yes.
I think whether it's antisocial personality disorder or whatever, we all have personality differences, whether or not it's diagnosable. And I love you really bringing it back to whatever happens, we're all people, we're all
Hmm.
humans having our
Hmm.
human experience. But the part that we tend to see the world through our own lens, our own color glasses, our own filter. So if we're not the kind of person, as you said, who would undermine or take advantage or, I love Survivor. I know a lot of it is made up or a reality TV or whatever, in the fact that you see, like, Mary, you and I to the end, you and I to the end, you and I to the end. Next scene, Josh, you and I to the you know what I mean? And it's kind of like, in that case, obviously you're taking everything with a grain of salt because people are more likely to get away with manipulations because it's a game and there's a big cash prize at the end. But
Hmm.
there are some people, and the point I want to really bring attention to, antisocial personality or not, there are people that you meet that immediately you're like, we're gonna be besties, or or there's people that you meet that you're like, I want to like them, but, and I
Hmm.
remember a few years ago when I was probably more like nearly 10 years ago now, when I was first in business, the very first like event I went to, I'm introverted, I have social anxiety, I struggle. And I met this woman and she did everything right. Like, she smiled, she shook my hand, she came in for the hug. I'm not really a hugger, but whatever. But part of me was like this mistrust from the beginning. I was like, there's something. But as I said, she didn't do anything wrong. Externally, everything looked amazing. And I overrode my inner gut
Hmm.
sense and became good friends with her. And then down the line, it went bad. And I've always kind of like, so from now on, I don't need to explain it to anyone else. And sometimes people don't ask, but sometimes people do. They're really insistent. They can tell. And it's kind of like, but if you were not this, you just let it go. Like I just like some people just aren't for me and I'm not for them. And that's, like I remember saying, you can't please everyone, you're not chocolate. And this person's like, I don't like chocolate. I'm like, my point exactly. Like, you can't please everyone, you're not oxygen. Do you know what I mean? But anyway, all this to say, like, I'm sure everyone listening, you've had an experience where there's been someone, for whatever reason, that your inner red flag's been going, danger, Will Robinson. And you've just
Hmm.
been like, no, no, it's fine. And then when you keep pursuing it, you convince yourself there's something wrong with you
Yes.
because they're doing everything right.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
as you were.
Yeah, 100%. And that is where it comes down to it doesn't even matter if somebody has a diagnosis. It's what do you want in your life? And if you don't want it in your life, you don't need any reason other than this doesn't work for me. Um,
Yes, that. And also what's in your life can change because you can change and they can change. Like if we look at the ocean and the waves rising and falling, sometimes you're at a peak and they're at a trough. And for whatever reason, your paths aren't aligning. And that doesn't mean forever. There's been times where people and I have parted ways, amicably or sometimes not so amicably. And then down the line, we have come across paths and then the connection's been reforged. And I don't know, this is my personal opinion. I've done no research. I have nothing to back it up, but I wonder if social media has given, like when I was a kid before Facebook and that, if you just didn't see someone, you just didn't see them again. We weren't connected. We weren't enmeshed by, oh my gosh, did they unfriend me? Like, and
uh-huh.
now we just are always like, it's kind of weird. It's like, I don't want to unfriend them because I don't want, and we overthink everything. And it's like, is this really a friend or is this somebody I met at a networking once and we added each other and now it's awkward? Or who is this? Like, I can't tell you how many times I've been like, who's this person? I have no recollection of them. And so
Hmm.
now I just like, cool, unfriend. But
Hmm.
sometimes people get all bent out of shape about it. But anyway, that's my thoughts. I wonder, we don't have the natural ebb and flow that we used to because we're artificially in each other's orbits.
Yeah. Well, and so I'll hopefully I come around to this because sometimes after menopause now, my brain is like, wait, what was I saying? But that I think is socialization partly because we worry so much. Even in real life, I don't really like this person, but I was never good at pretending. But sometimes you have to pretend because you don't want someone to, be upset. But
Yes. So anyway, back to
so
where you were in the story. So
yeah,
the
it'll
person,
come around to
were you helping them on board or you were helping them
yeah.
take the role on?
And I really felt like I was in like a secondary leadership position. I didn't want that position in the first place. I loved what I was doing. So as the week started to go on, there would be comments said like, I was talking to some people and there's people that don't like you. Or the so and so said that you're kind of an asshole. And I was like, because when you have a certain way of being in a position and it's important to you, and then first of all, the comments were like, "What?" And it's like, "Who?" And could we address it? And it was always like, "No, no, no, no. We're gonna." So there were just a lot of things that it really knocked me off back on my heels. And, I think one of the things that if we're going to look at the criteria for someone with antisocial personality disorder, someone with that diagnosis, like they can find the chink in your armor and they just want to like shove the knife right in there and they just know the spot. So for me, it was being good at what I did, earning the respect of colleagues, and it went right to the heart of, and the more, you're in the situation and then I could feel myself like getting more and more like, what is happening? What is happening? Because then the next day it would be like, oh, you did such a great job. Here's the next thing to do. And I would do the next thing in exactly the way I was asked to do it. And then it would be, you need to do better. That's not what I said. So it was really like, I won't use the F words. I'm not sure if I can, but it was really screwing with my
You
mind.
totally can.
Okay,
Full
so it
swearing
was it
welcome
was a
here.
mind fuck for sure. So in that situation, I had never been in anything like that. So I'm still trying to make sense of this. Like it's sort of I think that relationship where you think if I just try harder, if I just try harder, and I knew this, like this, I know these things, and so then I think it became do people really think this about me? I started to be suspicious of my colleagues, which is ludicrous because I know them and I've known them for years. But it was so insidious. And then even documenting things, the people that could have stepped in did not step in. So it was the one of the most pivotal moments of my life. And I think, what it brought me to where I am now, which is really kind of amazing. And I thought recently I should write a thank you note because I think it's one of those things where until you lose so many things, you don't know what you can be. So
Yes.
that was sort of the good part about it. I mean, I think it was really a blessing, to be honest. I still feel loss, and has been years, but it was really eye-opening. And what it fueled was my want to do what I do on my podcast, which has a lot of echoes of what you do. And I think that's why your message always resonates so much with me because, it's this idea of if I could go back, what would I do? And right now, what I'm working on is how to connect. I love plants. So, how to connect what naturally happens to what we do as people because we are nature. So when I think about what would nature do, well, nature wouldn't think about it. Nature would immediately recognize this is a threat to me. I'm going to put out my volatile organic compounds, which plants do. They send out their messengers. They warn the community, but they don't then, look around and be like, did I do the right thing? They just act. And so I think had I remembered who I really was, like I'm not this person that's being painted, but it just found that little chink in my armor and was able to bust it open. And I think that's when I was like, I don't ever want anybody to feel like this again because it was, well, it was pretty awful.
I think though, had you gone back, because we often think, if I knew then what I knew now or
Yeah.
whatever, the situation, like using the nature as the example, would have been totally different because if that person couldn't sense a chink in your armor, you wouldn't have been a target. Like they would have picked someone else. And I think that's really interesting because when you said, I can't remember your exact wording, but the other people stepping in or the other people stepping up, it's amazing how often people might see something or be aware of something, but they don't step in, not because they don't care and love you, but because they don't want the sight set on them.
Hmm.
Like my child had a thing at school recently that, kids, I'm not saying it's anything diagnosis here. It's like, kids are going to be kids.
Yes.
And the amount of compassion couldn't see someone else so stepped in. And obviously the sights then went on to them. And I was like, but isn't it amazing that you have the wherewithal and the unfuckwithableness to stand up for yourself and take no shit? And then it dissolves. Whereas, but where their heart hurt, it was like, but nobody came to my rescue or nobody spoke up for me. And I was like, it doesn't mean that they don't love and care about you. It's that people don't want someone's sight set on them.
Yes.
So, and also too, I love your thing about nature. Nature would have changed the environment to,
Hmm.
have the toxic things come out or gradually start to move or adapt.
Yes.
Um, yeah. So the thing you said when you emailed me initially that I don't know if we said it explicitly here just for the listeners so that they can really, because I'm sure we've all had some sort of circumstance, whether it be in a workplace, a family, a friendship, or something where we have felt like we've encountered someone who kind of lies to us or who, when we speak up, then really turns around and goes, oh, it was just a joke and tries to make light of it. Or, oh, I didn't mean it like that. And it's kind of like, but to me, this is how I felt. And they're wholly unavailable to how whatever they said landed. And the thing that you said was like, so I just continued to shrink. And I think
Hmm.
maybe that's why the name of your podcast is No Shrinking Violets. I never asked. But, you know, what we can do, I know for me, overeating was very much tied to that because I couldn't speak up and I didn't feel heard. So it's kind of like I would eat or shop or play Candy Crush. And I'm not saying you can't do any of these things. Obviously, you've got to eat to live. And yes, you can enjoy the games. But when you're doing something to avoid or to numb or to shove down in other areas of your life where you can't stand up, because when you do stand up and when you set boundaries and when you speak your truth, it's not the truth, it's not universal truth, it's your truth. Sometimes people will want to try and understand you and you can have difficult but moving the relationship forward or friendship forward conversations And sometimes people are wholly unavailable. They're like, this is how I see it. I don't care what you got going on. They don't say it like that, but and then they try and turn it onto you, and then you second guess yourself and like, am I being too much or too demanding or whatever? So I think, we have dynamics and we have relationships and we have, and we're all people. And once you said, reiterating that, we're all people having a human experience. But is the person that is in our life open to our experience being different to theirs, but equally as valid and wanting to find a middle ground? Or are they just dismissive or downplaying of how you feel?
Mhm. Yeah, and what I think we also underestimate is our ability to read the room or read the micro expressions. And we see that because recently I saw this person again that I'm referring to with a totally no anxiety, just saw the person and noticed the change in the eyes when certain things would be said. And I think back then I knew it, but there was too much emotion. So I think when you feel unsettled by someone or an interaction, don't respond in that moment necessarily, unless there's a situation that you have to, but take it and let it settle a little bit. And, you know, think about, am I concerned about what people are going to think about me if I address this? Because that's really some of the crux of it is we worry that if I talk about this, I'm high maintenance or I'm just being a bitch. It's like, well, you're allowed to have an opinion. And when you have that sense, like, yes, address it, especially if it's someone important to you. But if there's a sense of like, yeah, they're not getting it, then you might need to adjust how you interact with that person. And it might mean that you don't.
Yeah.
And that's hard to hear. People don't like, even especially long friendships, but I've heard that a lot from clients. We've been friends for years. Yeah, and does it feel good right now?
Yeah. Are you willing to sacrifice your self-worth, your peace of mind? So back to this woman who I said I met at this business thing and I had that inkling and we kind of became friends and it all went murky. Like 6 months later, after it really went down, like I blessed and blocked this person. I deleted them from everything. I was like, I want nothing to do with you. Um, we went to another event together. She came over and went in straight for the hug, and I put my hands up and backed off. And like, there was a room full of people here, so people were like, And as you said, I'm like, what will people think? It's easier. It's easier for me just to, And I was like, no. And then she starts saying like, I hold no ill will towards you, and whatever. I was like, I remember things differently. Really stood up for myself. I was like, I wish you all the best. I don't want to interact with you at this event. Can we? And she just kept coming up. It was like a 3-day event. Every day, once or twice a day, she kept trying to. And I was
Hmm.
like, I just don't think anyone's ever stood up for her like that before.
Hmm.
And I was just like, can you please stop approaching me? I'm not open for this. And I think
Hmm.
sometimes it's like, we do it to keep the peace, or we do it because there's other people around, or we do it because we've been friends forever. But you get to decide. And I don't want anyone in my life who's going to smile while they're patting me on the back for the photo. And I'm like, they're feeling where they're going to stick the knife in. No
Uh-huh.
thanks.
Yeah. Yeah. And we've just been socialized so much to be nice, just be nice. And we also, I think, don't expect women to go for us. I think we've learned that, but I think it's sort of like, especially in professional things, like, oh, you're going to have to get past the men. And I've had wonderful male mentors. I've had wonderful and nourishing friendships with female colleagues. But some of the most cutthroat professional interactions have been with women. And it's a whole different thing when you have a conflict with a woman because there's a lot of things that aren't said, they're implied, or they're so I think again you go back to, what is your gut feel like? Does this person make your life better? Do they add to it? Because if they don't, it's okay for you to say this isn't working. And you don't even have to say it, you can just decide it and your behavior follows.
And it's amazing. Most people respect that and will it will be amicable, or it will just you'll just drift apart. but there will be a couple, and maybe they have different tendencies. As I said, we're not diagnosing here or whatever,
Mhm.
that, and it's kind of like, but you standing in your ground and
Mm.
saying, like, it ends here. Because the thing I do love about social media is the ability to block. And sometimes
Mhm.
people do make different accounts or different this. You can really go down the path. Like, you can even block IP addresses. Like, I suppose they could log in from somewhere else, but most people, when you set a boundary or speak up for yourself, they might not be happy with it, they might not agree with it, but they'll at least respect it. And I think
Mhm.
it's the fear of the ones who are going to go too far that stop a lot of people from having boundaries anywhere. And then that's
Mhm.
just exhausting, living your life on the receiving end of what mood is this person in today?
Yeah. Yeah. And there are people train us. People train us how to treat them. So when you're tiptoeing around, and I've had people very close to me that this was the situation, that I would be the only one that would call it what it is. I actually had a brother who was an alcoholic. And when you have an addict in your life, you know, again, not saying anything about addicts in general, but I think when you have behavior that's repetitive, it's sort of walking that line between knowing that they can get better, they can recover, but also it's keeping your guard up often. And I think in that situation, he didn't get better. And so it was quite a different way of interacting. And not everyone in my life made a hard boundary. And I made a hard boundary. And, I think sometimes people are like, well, what does that look like? And I think it's different for everyone. So for me, he moved back in with my mom at one point, and I said to my mom, I will always want to see you, but I will not come to your house. So I'll pick you up. We'll go to lunch. We'll do shop, whatever you want to do. But as long as he's there, that's not where I want to be, because it would be the badgering and so I think it really depends, what do you want? What do you want? And if the outcome is to fix it, that's not a viable outcome. And follow your gut, because that's what nature does. We are nature. So maybe you will tolerate less than what somebody else would tolerate in your life. That doesn't mean that your boundary is wrong.
Yes. But
It's
also,
personal.
too, into terms of personalities, some personalities will put up, will put up, will put up, put up and shut up, put up, shut up until they can't anymore. And then that's it.
Hmm.
The end.
Hmm.
Some people will not even entertain it in the beginning. like,
Yeah.
and like in the past, I would put up with a lot of, tiptoeing or walking on eggshells behavior. Where I am right now in my life, I'm like, if I have to modify my behavior for you in any way, shape, or form, I can't have any sort of relationship because, I'm a bull in a china shop. I say exactly what I think. And it's not just to say my way or the highway or, whatever, but it's like, if I have to, oh, okay, dress like that and speak like that. And obviously there are times and places. Like if I go to an elderly person's home, I might modify my language slightly and not quite be the sweary fairy I naturally am. In that case, yes. But it's kind of like, I will only talk to you if you do this. No, I'm wholly unavailable for anybody like
Hmm.
that. It's like, cool. There's heaps of people who already naturally speak like that. Like I remember potential clients before, I'd hire you if you didn't swear. Now it's like, well, you wouldn't hire me then, would you? Because
Uh-huh.
this is the way that I am. And I think, there are certainly times where but you get to choose.
Hmm.
And if I'm always having to bite my tongue or you dress in a certain way or behave in a certain way, it's like, nope, that's
Hmm.
just not what I want to do. And I think we get to decide. And I like your thing about nature because, nature, like it leads into your thing, and I'll let you say more about it. But like, you teach people how to treat you,
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
and there are some people, and even when you look at, and I think we talked about this on your podcast, how different people can wear certain clothing or get away, like how can they get away with that or how they pull that off because they're unapologetically themselves.
Hmm.
Other people might not be that way. And it's just kind of like you get to decide. And do you want to live your life where you're not being truly you? And I think for some people, I know for past me, it was kind of easier in my brain because it's like, well, if they don't like me, this is not how I am. Like, it hurts less when if you're like unapologetically you and people don't like you, it's like, oh, that really hurts. But if you don't like that version of me, well, I was just putting on a mask anyway.
Oh, that's absolutely true. And it's so funny. I was thinking recently about this when people have a first date with somebody and they worry so much about what am I going to wear and what am I going to say? It's like just wear what lights you up. Say, just be yourself because down the road, if this turns into a serious relationship, how do you undo being the person you think they want you to be? Because when somebody loves you because they love you, that is the most powerful thing. I think we think of the opposite. Like, what if they don't like me? And exactly what you're saying. Well, if I'm not really me, then they're not rejecting me. But the power of that, of just being you. And, I put it in terms of food, like not everybody likes red beet eggs, or I don't even know if that's a thing in Australia, but that's the thing here. Red beet eggs. So,
No, is it like eggs that are cooked with, or are you talking like
yeah,
beetroot?
they're pink. Yeah, you put them in with the red beets. You hard boil them and put them in with the red beets. So they have a very distinct flavor. And it's not, I don't even know why maybe it's the colors behind you. I don't even know why I came up with that. But
No, but it makes total sense. But the thing is, it's funny. Like, I think what true love is, I don't know, everyone has their own opinion, but I like beetroot. That's what made when you said red beet eggs, is, my husband can't stand it. But like, say he's making burgers or something, he'll get the beetroot, he'll put it like way in the corner and be like, there's the poison for you. And we have this joke. It's like he gets it, he buys it, he prepares it, but it's like that's Suze's area. And it's
mm-hmm,
the same as like I don't like jalapenos in any way, shape, or form, but I'll get them for him. And last night we
mm-hmm,
had quesadillas, and I was like, the kids were going and running. I'm like, don't eat that one, as daddy's. And they're like, oh, because they knew it would have jalapenos on it. So it's kind of like,
uh-huh,
I love that he loves it, like more power to you, but I wouldn't eat that if it was the last thing on earth.
uh-huh. And there's nothing wrong with jalapeno, right? It's a wonderful vegetable. It's just not for you. And
Exactly.
that's where I think we think if someone doesn't like us, there's something wrong with us. It's like, well, no, it's just not their taste. There's nothing wrong with a carrot if somebody just doesn't like the carrot. So,
But you
to
also
sort
too,
of,
you can find a middle ground. Like, say you go out for a meal, like you might have a lot of food preferences, and we're talking about preferences, not allergies and things here.
yeah,
But it's
right.
like, there are there are insurmountable numbers of dishes that my husband and I could both eat, like, finding that middle ground. Or there are things that we could make, and, depending on, he's like, I wouldn't want to pull a jalapeno off because to me it was like, it's certain the juice, the spice could still be there. But, when you're making it, don't put that on yours. And I think in terms of friendships and connections and, like the cancel culture, a lot of the social media is someone says one thing that I don't agree with, and now I need to tear them down because, oh my
Mm,
goodness. And it's like, we have opinions and we have preferences on so many things, from
mhm,
food to, like, the big ones. And it's just kind of like, can we see their opinion is equally valid as ours, if different, and just
mhm,
move on our way? And obviously there may be things that it's like, no, this is a hard line for me. This is a boundary. We need to have the same opinion on this. But it's, how many of those things are really the case? Because I think some people have like my way or the highway for like almost everything. Like, I can
yeah.
imagine if my husband's like, if you don't like jalapenos, you can't be my wife. It's like, cool, all right. I'm not going to force myself to eat it. Like, find someone else. Good luck. Go with God. you know?
Plus you're crazy, but yeah, and obviously right now in the United States, this has been magnified. And it's really, really difficult because I think what people don't understand is there was a time where having different political views were just different political views. You talk about it, you kind of can try to understand, like, why would you support this idea or this idea? And it wasn't always easy to disagree, but it was easier because it was truly based in trying to think about what was the best for the people, for the community. And now we're in a different space. And, I think that is where people really get confused. Like, how much can I accept without saying sort of these broad moral things are okay or not okay? And we love black and white. We like, you're either in or you're out.
You're
And
with
that
us
is
or you're against us.
exactly. And that is magnified here, which I'm sure that you know that, but to live in it is, it's even obviously more stark. And so I think when you're thinking about people, let's just look at relationships. Relationships are gray nearly all the time. So somebody does something that's hurtful. Was that intentional? Or was it? And they don't know how you feel about it until you tell them. And there's where you're going to find your truth. If
Yeah.
you can if you can express that and like they continue to disregard it. Now, if it's like dirty underwear on the floor, you just decide like, am I going to tolerate that or not? But if it's this sort of that gut feeling again, like there's sort of this condescending tone, or they're saying things in front of my kids that sound like a joke, but it's not really, that is a gut instinct thing. And that's a broader situation.
And what I think it ties back to, and you touched on it, but I don't think you said it explicitly, is the curiosity welcome? Because there have been times where I've had a difference of opinion, like one person's thought supported one thing and I've supported another. And instead of just going, well, you're in that camp and I'm in that camp and move on, just be like, you know, why do you do that? But not why as in like I'm trying to convince you or why you're wrong, but just like why, out of pure interest. And sometimes, more often than not, I've found that, you know, we've had what I'd say is base level agreements, or at least our paths would cross enough. But the way this person has said it, like I'm just thinking, you know, you said the beats behind me, like to me this is pink, but maybe the camera comes through red or whatever. But it's like my kids and I, we play this game called Spotto. I'm sure lots of people are familiar with it. You see a car of a certain color, you call Spotto, because we do lots of driving. And anyway, our car for Spotto is yellow. You should hear, Mary, the debates in our car, especially when all four of us, my husband and I, the two kids, it's like, that's not yellow, that's gold, or that's green, or that's orange. And I was like, no, or that's not a car, it's a van, or it's a, you know, and it's hilarious because usually what we have to do is one person sits out that round of the game and they play the moderator and they get to decide whether it's yellow or a van or whatever. But it's so funny because one person will be adamant, like, I want the points, so I'm calling that yellow. And the other people will be like, that's not even yellow. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like, it's, and I think sometimes, like, these are just arbitrary examples, but we get so stuck on, you know, how could you think this? But they don't think that, but we've assumed they have because we haven't gotten curious and asked.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. Curiosity is one of the best stances because we forget that. And even if you start with that, so I'm curious, because I think it takes the wall down. It takes, if you really are, you're looking at a behavior and you're thinking, I don't know, is this intentional? Like this doesn't feel good, but maybe I'm misappropriating the reason for it. And I think when you can approach it with, okay, I'm feeling some type of way here, but I'm curious. Can we explore what's happening? Here's my feeling, and really kind of go from that, like you're saying, that word curiosity. And also, I love that in your family, disagreement is safe. And
Yes.
that is not the case in every family.
And I think you haven't had that experience growing up. If you haven't been somewhere where your dissenting opinion is safe, it can be easier just to be quiet, like you said, your workmates or colleagues in the beginning. But also, too, there was something about curiosity and questions and stuff. I had an experience, I've had several, but where someone said, you know, everyone's saying stuff about you. And I'm like, okay, curious. When you say everyone, who do you mean? Oh, well, I can't name names. And then, you know, the thing in your body is going, you know, so it's kind of like, so when you say, like, has a specific individual said this to you, or have you read it in the ether of the conversation and made it mean this? Not that you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to catch someone out, but like sometimes, like, I don't know about you, but I've been in places where someone's dead a statement. I haven't agreed with them, but I just don't have the energy that day to disagree with them. So I say nothing. So then assume everyone thinks the same that I do. It's like, but you
Mm-hmm.
never asked how I thought. You just
Right.
assumed. So usually if some feedback comes back to me, like, everyone says this about you, and I do that, I'm curious, like, when you say everyone, who do you mean? And they
Mm-hmm.
won't name names because they don't want to stir shit. And it's like, but what are you actually doing telling me this? Hello.
Yeah.
But it's like, I guess more often than not, they've said this amongst other people who haven't disagreed with them. So then they've meant that everybody says this about me. And I
Mm-hmm.
think by knowing that, oh, my life's gotten so much easier because it's like, okay, cool.
Mhm. Yeah, we assume silence means agreement. And, I think anytime somebody says a statement like that, it's like there's the curiosity again. I'm curious about what did you want to achieve by telling me this? Like, what's your
That
reason
as
for telling me?
well. Yes. And I think, some people really get closed off for any sort of pushback or any sort of I've experienced it differently. It's like, I thought we were doing this. And it's like, well, I thought I was doing you a favor. It's like, oh, this is genuine time together. And it's like, I actually don't enjoy this. And some people getting really mad about it. And it's
Mhm.
like, but did you ask what I enjoyed? So it's I think sometimes it's, failure to communicate or not saying the thing and assuming the silence means that they agree with you. Because
Mhm.
I can think of a number of times where someone's thought we were doing something as friends, and in my point of view, I was helping them out. Because like I run a business, so if you send me a message and go, "Hey, can we jump on Zoom and talk about how to run a podcast?" To me, that's not hanging out with my friends. Hanging out with my friends is like, let's talk Survivor, baby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So it's kind of like, what is your point of view from this? And it's like, oh no, that's just our building our friendship. And it's like, well, I'm curious about why asking me questions about business is friendship to you. And people who are really good biz and friend colleagues will go, oh my gosh, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't see it this way. And other people will
Mhm.
be like, oh, what a bitch. You know?
Uh-huh. And I think sometimes that snap judgment is really embarrassment because they, like you're saying, they've been called out. It's like, oh. But instead of examining their own behavior, it's like you have like find a mirror because comments are a mirror. And I think to go back to anytime somebody says to you, everybody's saying this about you, it's like, then you're in a position of like, would I say that to somebody else? And if I would I approach it differently? And what would be my objective? Is it to, because I'm concerned about them? Like, are you okay? Because lately you've been very short with people, or people are feeling this way, because that to me is care. But you're putting it in a context, right? You're not coming at it like sort of like seeing what you're going to do. Like, everybody's saying it's like, I'm concerned because here's what things are feeling like lately. So I think also there, again, trust your gut. If you feel like somebody comes at you and the objective doesn't seem to be in any way to support or understand, that is another red flag that I think you need to address.
Yeah, and I find it interesting too. Sometimes people do say the concern thing, but it doesn't feel like real concern. Like I'm
Hmm.
someone who's struggled with my weight my entire life. And I always find it interesting when people go, oh, I'm concerned about you. And it's like, my weight is, yes, my physical health. But what about my mental and emotional health? Why am I resorting to food? Why is this happening? And it's kind of like when you're like, you've got to only eat kale and run and all this sort of stuff. And it's like, that's only one aspect of a person. So it's kind of like,
Yeah.
are you concerned about me as a holistic person, or are you concerned how I'll look in your wedding pictures? Or do you know what I
Hmm.
mean? So it's kind of like, and when there is that pushback, as I said, people, from my opinion, who are your true friends or true allies or true people, it's like, oh my gosh, let's talk more about this and why you feel that way. And other people will be like, well, I'm just trying to help you. And it's kind
Hmm.
of like, ooh. And it's just, it's the older I've gotten, the more I've leaned into boundary work and all this stuff that I do now, the
Hmm.
deeper the friendships I have created. Like, there are people who say to me, Suze, I just, I can't talk to you this week. I got so much going on. I'll be like, cool, go about my merry way. I don't make that mean, oh my gosh, they don't like me anymore. Or,
Hmm.
whereas
Yeah.
sometimes you try and say that to other people and they make it all about them. And it's like, it's got nothing to do with you. So it's funny when you read my emails, I have like a welcome sequence as most businesses do. It's fairly new, this email sequence. But the last email is a story about how I went through something. It's gonna be a spoiler if you're not on my email list yet. But I went to watch my daughter dance. I'd seen her practice the dance, but I hadn't heard the song. Anyway, when the music started, I just burst out crying and I left the room. And it was funny. My daughter was like, my mummy thinks I'm a terrible dancer. One of the other mums said something to me, and I didn't even register because I was like having a whatever. And she was like, oh, that Suze is such a bitch. She's just ignoring me. And then the teacher was like, did you think the dance was inappropriate? So I had to deal with three other people's response to my response about this. Nobody actually asked. Like, I don't expect my daughter to, she's a child. But for me, that was the music that played at my nephew's funeral. So I was
Oh,
just
wow.
like, I can't, this song always sends me to tears. I need to get out. And I just think it's funny that other people have their own stuff going on, has nothing to do with us. And sometimes we
Mhm.
make it mean all this thing. Like the teacher was like, was the dance inappropriate? I don't even remember the moves. Like the
Yeah.
person was like, oh, were you mad at me? I didn't even see you. And my daughter
Mhm.
was like, did you think I was bad? And I was like, oh, honey, you're beautiful. And then when you're raw and having your own experience and having to help other people with their experience, sometimes you just don't have any capacity for that.
Yeah. And, on the other side, those people can say what else could be true because we do make assumptions. That's we're born to look at a situation and parse out what is happening here. But
Yeah.
we often come to the worst conclusion. So I think, also well, sometimes I think you guys know me. Like I'm like, what would I really do those kinds of things? And so it's sort of thinking like, what else could be true? There's a million other options than Suze is ignoring me,
I
or
love that way
now.
of putting what else could be true. And I'm just looking at time, speaking of true, we have to wrap up soon. But with
Yeah.
that thought, I'm thinking about like how I've actually embodied that without having that frame for it. Because in the past, say, I said hello to you in the supermarket and you like snubbed me, I'd be like running through my head of, oh my God, what did I do to Mary and
Mhm.
whatever. But now if you snub me in the supermarket, because I said hello and I would just go to, she just didn't see me. Like she didn't
Mhm.
register. But the same, there could be a whole host of
Uh-huh.
things. But it's
Isn't
kind
it
of like,
funny we don't, yep, we
what
go to
else could be
worst.
true?
Yep.
So
We
now
always,
I go to, oh, they just didn't see me or they were in a
yep.
rush. But past me would have been like, what have I done or said and
Mhm.
didn't know? And I think, if the listeners get from this, that saying, what else could be true here?
Mhm.
Because there could be any number of things. And when you live and start to really cultivate this environment around where people can speak their mind and be curious and ask questions, your frame of reference shifts because you're no longer surrounding yourself with people who may have deliberately seen you and avoided you and all this sort of stuff. Because you're just in a world full of people who responsive, not like you. I'm not saying hang out with people just like us, but who,
Yeah.
can speak their truth as equally as valid. So it's kind of like, or any number of things. So it's
Mhm.
funny, one of my kids, she had a friend and I've been trying to get in contact with a mum this year and she hasn't been responding and she did last year. And I was like, I wonder if she changed her number. Not part of me was like, has she ignored me or whatever? Like, has she
Mhm.
lost her phone and got a new number? Whereas in the past, it would have been like, oh my gosh, what have I done to this woman? And I
Mhm.
think, what else could be true? How you take it allows you to navigate your world differently.
Mhm. Yep. For
So
sure.
anything else to add to that before we wrap up, Mary?
I don't think so. I think that's a great thing to end on
Yeah,
because,
perfect. What
and
else could be
well,
true?
right. Yes, what else could be true?
So, Mary, let the listeners know what it is that you do and where they can find you.
Okay. So I'm a therapist and I have a private practice, but that's really in the United States, you can only see a therapist in the state where you live. So it's restrictive, but we're working on it. But overall, I'm sort of in this weird period of flux because I started to go in a few different directions, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs do. And I realized I was doing it for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm really focusing the most on now is bringing good podcast content. So, you mentioned my podcast is No Shrinking Violets, and it does come because that saying is from like Victorian England, and it basically means women that are small and shrink. But violets are like the most hardy flower, and they just simply close up at night and they rest. So I love that title. So you can find me anywhere for No Shrinking Violets, and I'm also working on a book that has to do with just learning what your essential nature is and not apologizing for it. We don't fault any plant for not thriving. And we do that with ourselves. So I love the idea of, we're all nature. So, but I'm building out some other things. You can find me at maryrothwell.net. And I keep adding things to that. And you can also find my podcast on my website.
I love that. Thank you so much, Mary, for joining me. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And yeah, I think there were some real gems in this one to take away and to go forward with. So I appreciate that. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.